And we are live. Hello, my lovelies. Today I have our author chat for the group book, The Extraordinaries, with our very, very special guest, Mr. TJ Klune. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And then, of course, I have my lovely co-hosts, Kaylani and Clint, and their channels are linked down below if you want to go and check them out. But I'm just ready to dive right in. This was so good. It was so much fun. And we have questions.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions.
Yeah, I have questions. All right, that's super cool. Let's go.
Before we get into the questions, I do want to thank you for this series because out of the 12 pieces of your work that I have read so far, these feel like they are a love letter, not only just to superheroes, but to the queer community as a whole. Because of all the queer references. Like, I squealed during Flashfire at a Marsha P. Johnson reference that was just like thrown in, and I was like, oh my god, kids are going to ask questions. Kids are going to want to know these things. And oh my god, I love this.
That's a big part. That's, obviously I included a reference to her, and I include reference to other queer focused things because I understand that young adult is a group of readers at any age can read young adult, and people enjoy the young. But when I write young adult, I'm thinking of the 14, 15, 16-year-old queer kids out there who didn't get to have a book where they could see themselves like this, where they get to be the hero and save the day, but also I want to remind queer kids that they have a history, that they're where they are today is because of people of color and trans women and trans men basically throwing the first brick to be able to allow us to have our rights that we enjoy today. We would not be here without people like Marsha P. Johnson, without Harvey Milk, without people who put their lives on the line so that we could enjoy the freedoms that we see today. And I think it's important that queer kids be reminded that they should know their history about their community and where they came from.
Yeah. We have a lot of comments coming in, so let me go through these. Super excited. Hello. So excited. I just finished this book this morning. Hello. Hello, TJ. You are an icon.
You really are.
Hi, TJ. I love your books.
Hi.
Hi, all. So excited for you being here, TJ. Oh, and they love my shirt. Thank you.
That's good. That's a good shirt.
So the way you wrote our main character with the ADHD, I believe that you must have experience with either.
I have ADHD.
Either you have, okay. I was gonna say either you have it or you're very close to somebody that has it, because that was dead on. My son is this main character. He is extreme ADHD, and all the things that were going through his head and the things that other people thought or said or reacted to him are all the same things that my son has heard many, many times. And
you know what I tell people who they ask me, what is it really like to have ADHD? And the best example I can give is in this book, it's a throwaway part that absolutely has nothing to do with anything, but Nick and Gibby are in the subway, and Nick notices that somebody has thrown a hot dog up into the ceiling like that, and he comments on it, and then pages later he brings it up again. That's how ADHD works, because he notices this thing that catches his attention, and he begins to hyper fixate on it. And and by the fact that pages go by, they're having conversation, and the fact that he brings that up in that conversation shows you that he's still been thinking about that the entire time they've been having the serious conversation that they've been having. That's how ADHD really kind of is that, I can focus. Like right now, I have like 30 different things going through my head. I'm thinking, oh crap, I forgot to feed my dog and he's probably going to interrupt in a minute. I'm thinking, oh crap, I forgot to do laundry today, which I was supposed to do, but I was too busy working. And it's just one of those things that we tend to there's idea that people with ADHD are scatterbrained, and that's part of it. That can be true too, but it's not because we're forgetful. It's just that we found something that interests us and found something that we have to find out about. Like that's what happens when I go through my Wikipedia spirals. I mean, I love Wikipedia just because I'll click on a link, something that interests me, and then 2 hours later, I'm on something completely separate, but I'm still looking up stuff because I just want to keep on learning. And I think that's what Nick is. I think that there's a very big common misconception and a huge stigma still surrounding being neurodiverse. And that means, in case people don't know, neurodiversity is ADD, ADHD, and it also can include people with autism under that umbrella. And those are still completely separate things. My experience with ADHD isn't necessarily going to reflect the next person's experience with ADHD, but there is still some universal commonality to it, which is what we can see with Nick.
Yeah, I remember when we first got our son put on medication that actually worked for him. I remember having a conversation with him, and it blew my mind, this conversation, because it was probably the most thought out, intelligent conversation I'd ever had with him. And he was like 8. And it just blew my mind that it was the same child. And he said, I was asking him, what he thought of his medicine and did he like his medicine and, anything like that. And he told me that he liked it. And I was like, well, why? And he said, at the time he was coloring a picture. And he said, because before I couldn't do this. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, I couldn't sit and focus and look at this and color it from beginning to end because my brain would think of something else and I need to go do that. And then it would think of something else and I need to go do that. And he also had impulse issues where he would just do whether it was going to cause him harm or not. He would just do whatever he thought of. And he was also like, yeah, I don't get in nearly as much trouble.
Yeah, it's not, we are not broken. There's nothing wrong with us. We just have something, to be pithy, how it says in the book, we just have something a little bit extra. And that's, it's not something that needs to be cured. A kid with something that people seem to think too is that it's something that can be cured or something that you grow out of. But a kid with ADHD is a teenager with ADHD who becomes an adult with ADHD. That's just how it works. And, the being able to write a superhero story, which is really, as was said earlier, a love letter to the queer community, but it's also a love letter to the ADHD kids out there who never get to see themselves as a hero of the books. When I was a kid, I never got to see, A, queer kids, but B, queer kids with ADHD. That's just not how it worked. And still, even today in 2022, we still don't get to see that a whole lot. And when we do, sometimes you can tell it's by somebody who does not have experience with it or has not done their research. And that is something that really, really rubs me raw because I've read a book, I've read more than one book where the ADHD was something to be cured. That, this part of their brain was broken, but now it's fixed and it was just their burgeoning superpowers. And which is what I love about Nick, is that we get the idea by the end of the stories that he has superpowers or hinting at it. But I did that knowing full well that I was never going to make that a solution for his ADHD. So his ADHD continues on through the rest of the series, as does his growth with it, his acceptance of it. Because when we meet him in the Extraordinaries, Nick isn't very happy with this diagnosis, not happy with who he is. And I wasn't either when I was a kid, because I thought it was one of those things, like being queer, it was something that made me different. It's something that made me have this otherness that didn't allow me to relate to my peers. And it's a struggle, but at the same time, I always want to show that something like this is not a death sentence.
I love the fact that he was like, my brain is my superpower.
Well, and to be honest, that didn't come from Nick. That came from Gibby. That came from Jazz. That comes from his dad. Nick doesn't believe that it is his superpower in the first book, and he has to be told that it is. And we hear that a lot with ADHD parents of kids with ADHD who tell their kids that it's their superpower. And, that is, I think, a wonderful thing for a kid to be able to hear that, you know what? Yeah, you may be a little different, but you know what you have? You have something that other people don't have. Your brain is a marvel.
And I feel like that's one thing that I find in every book that I've read of yours is, especially being, part of the LGBTQI plus community, being a Black woman, it's like, it's fantastic to read books where you feel seen. And in every single book that I read of yours, you have included something that not many people talk about. Like that's the other way. In Green Creek, you have asexual and aromantic rep. Like, there are not people out there that are writing many books that make you feel seen like that. Granted, there are some out there. I'm not saying there's none.
Right. There are some very good asexual books out there. And that's another thing. I'm asexual. And so when I want people to understand that again, it's not that I'm broken, because a lot of people have the idea that asexuality means there's something wrong with you physically, or that you have some trauma in your background, and maybe that can be part of it. Let me say that there is a such thing as trauma-based asexuality, and we should respect that. But that's not me. I'm just, again, I'm wired a little different. That's why when I wrote a novel called, back in, what was it, 2015, called How to Be a Normal Person, and that is starring Gus Tiberius, who is coded to be read as a person with autism, but the love interest in that, Casey, is asexual. And it's not Casey that's trying to figure out how to be a normal person, it's Gus, because Gus thinks he needs to be a little bit more normal to be able to be friends with someone like Casey. And I love that we can have fiction now that celebrates asexuality and isn't something that is being held against the character.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah, I actually told my son that he needs to read this, because he just turned 16 yesterday, and he is a queer kid with ADHD. And I told him, I was like, this is you.
I wrote that book for him. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yes. He has to read it now. Yeah.
Let's see. We have some more comments here. I'm so excited. There's no book. I've already read 4 by TJ Klune I have not liked.
No.
I just read my first TJ Klune book, House in the Cerulean Sea, and loved it. As a special education teacher, the message in that book touched my heart so much. This is the only one I haven't read yet.
Whoa. That's a reverse of what normally happens, but that's good.
Kaylani sent this to me.
I mean, it's so good.
I mean, out of my stack, the ones I haven't read is what we're doing a read along of later this year, Lightning Struck Heart. Which I'm excited, because from everything I've heard you say about that series, I feel like we're going to get like the humor from this, just more adults.
So I was at a panel a couple of weeks ago. I was in the Tucson Book Fair, and it was wonderful. It was so cool to be able to see people and talk to them face to face for the first time in a very long time. And we were up on stage, and people were talking about The House in the Cerulean Sea, because let's be frank, that's the book I'm most known for. And then a person stands up in the audience and asks me to describe to the rest of the people who have not read Tales from Verania or The Lightning Struck Heart what that series is. And I came down to a 2-word description of that series, and it's erotic Shrek.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I remember when Clint started talking about us reading those books. I read the synopsis and I was like, what?
Yeah, these books. Okay, so imagine if Nick. So Sam Haversford, who's the main character in the first 4 books, he is essentially Nick's older brother. But imagine if Sam was Nick grown up, but had also done a ton of cocaine. And then that is not really done cocaine, but seems like he's done kind of a ton of cocaine. And that is Sam. That book, The Lightning Struck Heart, what came to me during a time when I was in a very dark place, and I hadn't written anything for a very long time, and I needed to write something that made me happy. So I decided to set out to write something that was so ridiculous and so over the top that it would never be published, because it's just too weird and off the wall. So imagine my surprise when I finish it, and it's not only accepted for publication, but it becomes one of my most popular books, so much so that I'm getting ready to release the 5th book in the series next month. So it is not for everyone. If you go into these books expecting the same type of feelings that you get from The House in the Cerulean Sea, not only are you probably going to be horrified, but you will be probably looking for Jesus. And that's not really These books aren't, the first book especially isn't to be taken seriously. I've been surprised with how many people have told me how emotional they still get in the first book. But the 3 other books in the series, the ones that are currently out, are very, it's my take on the idea of a chosen one, and what if the chosen one doesn't want to be a chosen one. So I love that series. I love those characters, and obviously, which is why I continue to write in that world.
I will say I did watch your interview with Queer Book Box, where you described this as Princess Bride on cocaine, and I went, "Okay, sold." I just went sold.
That's what it is. It's Princess Bride on cocaine. Oh God, I'm really good at describing the series.
I was like, and the fact that everybody voted as this being the next one, that out of, what was it, 200 and something votes I got, 93% voted for Lightning Struck Heart. I was like, okay, cool, guys. Let's have fun.
What's so funny is when I get new readers coming to me because of The House in the Cerulean Sea, and they say, well, the Lightning Struck Heart sounds like it's a similar feeling. I'm like, well, no. I mean, yes, you're going to have feelings, and yes, you'll laugh, and yes, you'll cry, and all this other stuff. But you shouldn't go into it expecting the same type of book, especially if you're like, oh, look at this warm, cozy feeling I just got from all these gremlins and their queer dads. This is the Lightning Struck Heart is so completely as far away from you can get from that as you possibly can, and still be in the realm of books. So I love it, though. Again, it's not going to be for everyone, and I totally get that. I totally understand that it's not for everyone, but for those who do enjoy it, man, that means you are crazy, as I am, and so I welcome you.
Like, we need crazy after everything.
Right, you do. You have to.
Ridiculous.
Right, and if erotic Shrek isn't making you jump in joy, then I don't know what is.
Oh, Karina says, this is going back to the ADHD conversation. Karina says, I always say I have too many tabs open in my brain.
Yeah, that's exactly
I
what
have too
it
many
feels
tabs
like.
open on my computer right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
I related to Nick so much with the ADHD. While I'm not officially diagnosed with ADHD, I saw so much of myself in him and some of his mannerisms.
Same.
Yeah, the one thing that I wanted to, I always take caution with is I get a lot of times, and I'm not saying that's what the commenter is doing, but a lot of times, like after How to Be a Normal Person came out, I had a lot of people write to me saying, oh, I think I'm asexual because of what I read in this book. Mm-hmm. And I say, you know what? You got to do your own research. Don't just take my word for it in these characters. Talk to your doctor. Same thing with ADHD. I get a lot of people writing to me saying, I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I feel like I am now because I think like Nick. That's not for you to decide on your own, and that's not for me to decide through a character. You need to actually speak to a medical professional who can actually diagnose these things, because if you do have ADHD, trust me, there are things that can make things feel a little bit better in your head. And why wouldn't you want to do that and make things a little easier for yourself? So please don't self-diagnose when it comes to these kinds of things. Make sure that you're getting the treatment and the help that you need to be able to think clearly, because we all need a little help sometimes.
My brain hurts.
Yeah.
So he wanted me to take it off my earbuds so he could hear all that too.
Yeah.
This is the ADHD queer boy I was just telling you
about. That's how we do, bud. Yep, I'm right there with you, so it's totally fine.
Let's see. The literary lawyer says, so glad I remembered you guys were streaming today. I absolutely love TJ's books. Under the Whispering Door was my favorite book of last year and left me in tears.
Well, thank you. That is so wonderful.
It is now my favorite book of all time.
Wow,
because of how hard I bawled my eyes out, not expecting to ugly cry.
That book was the hardest thing I've ever written. That one and Into This River I Drown both deal with grief and the idea of grief. Into This River I Drown deals with the rage side of grief, whereas Under the Whispering Door deals with the softer side of looking at it. But it's no less as difficult, because grief is something so profoundly devastating and at the same time cathartic that we don't always understand what we're feeling when we're going through it. But the idea of what I love about the idea of grief is that no two people go through it the same way, yet we all experience it at one point or another in our lives. And there's still something universal about that. And I know that that book was my wish to the world for what happens to us after we all close our eyes.
Oh, I love that.
Amy says, I'm sorry, he's chewing on my shoulder. Amy says, as I was reading The Extraordinaries, I was waiting for my adult diagnosis this week. I was meant to read this at the time. Thank you for putting this into the world.
Well, thank you for that. And I hope your diagnosis all goes well.
I'm finishing a degree in psychology, and I think the problem with stigma and mental health is exactly that definitions gravitate toward it being the absence of mental problems.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And there's, it's so weird that we can still live in an age where the idea of discussing mental health is still somewhat taboo. And the fact that the fact that it's still uncomfortable for people to talk about is a really big sign that we're not going in the right direction as much as we should be. And that's why I always will continue to talk about stuff like this, because for all I know, there's somebody out there listening or watching that's suffering in silence. And maybe what I have to say about being honest about my own mental health struggles could, have a positive influence on them, and maybe give them the strength to be able to help themselves, because we all need help. I think it's so funny that people are saying, oh, I'm not depressed, or I don't need to go to therapy. Everybody needs to go to therapy. We're all a little bit sad about something. That's just how it is. And we need to give our permission. We need to remind ourselves that it's okay to have permission. It's okay not to be okay. We have to be able to say that kind of stuff, because the more that we talk about it, the more people will open up about their own personal struggles. And I am very fortunate enough that I have a platform with an audience where people tend to listen to what I say. And for some odd reason, I am in this position and I enjoy it. And if I can help other people, then you know what, I've done what I set out to do.
So this comment is in reference to the one that was before. She says, I strongly disagree and believe mental health is knowing how to turn mental issues towards your advantage and getting tools to deal with them so they aren't a stone in your shoe. That's what your books do. Thank you from the profession.
Wonderful. I really appreciate that.
Hello, how are you all doing today? Hope you are well, and I enjoyed my prize.
Wow, so no happy late birthday?
Yesterday was Xander's birthday. He's 16.
Oh, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Xander.
Yeah, man.
This is my first TJ Klune book, and I'm determined to go read more.
Yes.
Every TJ Klune book I've read so far has pulled at my heartstrings in one way or another.
I mean, Tren, you went down the rabbit hole of starting with Under the Whispering Door and going straight into House on the Cerulean Sea, back to back.
Loved House of the Cerulean Sea and Under the Whispering Door. Can't decide which I loved more.
There's no choosing. They're both fantastic.
They really are.
Excited for the read along of Tales of is it Verania? Verania? Let's see. Green Creek and House of the Cerulean Sea are all-time favorites. Your stories bring so much light into our lives. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. I read Under the Whispering Door at just the right time. I lost all three of my grandparents during COVID. Oh, gosh. And the relationship in that book with the grandpa really touched me, especially the ending.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. That's got to be tough. I know that. See, when The House in the Cerulean Sea came out, it came out in March of 2020, which is right at the very beginning of, or it came out the week pandemic exploded in the United States. Mm-hmm. And both that and Under the Whispering Door were written pre-pandemic. And though I wish the world was in a much different place, I think both those books came out at exactly the right time when they were supposed to. The House in the Cerulean Sea was a reminder that they're still good and things are going to be okay. And then to have a year and a half later, Under the Whispering Door come out when we're in 2 years into the pandemic, I think that book allowed people to have a shoulder to lean on when they needed it, because there's no denying it that the past since 2020, or hell, let's go back to 2016. Things have been very, very difficult in this country, and the idea that we can find some sense of relief or escapism through fiction is just that's why I love books so much, is that they can transport us away, at least for a little while, so things don't have to be so bad all the time.
I've heard the house in the Cerulean Sea referred to as a hug. And I've also heard it referred to as a middle grade for adults.
Yes.
Yeah, and I get kind of weirded out when people try to classify that book as young adult, or because let's face it, the lead character is a 40-year-old man. That's not a young adult book. He just so happens to be he's a 40-year-old man populating a very cozy, happy world, at least on the island, I should say. And the fact that we can have a 40-year-old overweight man who's balding and very, very fussy be able to be the hero of his own fantasy novel is adding to the fact that he's queer. Just, I mean, we don't normally get to see that, especially in fantasy, where fantasy tends to be Game of Thrones and grimdark, and absolutely nothing wrong with that. I love a sword and shield and fantasy epic. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when I was a kid, I used to read books like Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones, and the idea of cozy fantasy is something that I love, but we don't get to see a whole lot anymore.
Yeah.
As a queer man who is overweight, it is nice to be seen in books, and I've noticed you have several characters that represent, because
I want characters from all walks of life to be able to right. You have Paul, who is fat in the book, and he has he has some doubts in himself, but he never goes on a mission to try to change himself for Vince. Neither does in the House on the Cerulean Sea. Linus has some internalized fat phobia that he goes through, but at the very end, he comes to realize that, you know what, he's okay with how he is because he's how he's supposed to be. And I think that we need to celebrate that kind of not only diversity among the types of characters and their backgrounds that they come from, but also body diversity and body positivity in these kinds of books, because we are, especially when it comes to the idea of romance. In romance, everybody has to be perfect with their abs and their very large appendages, and it's we have to that's granted. Romance is the idea of romance is that it is a fantasy, but at the same time, why can't we have a fantasy with realistic people? Why do we have to have? Why does the fantasy always have to be the big burly dude who can be kind of a jerk but also has a heart of gold? Why can't they be a fat guy who has the same thing? Wallace is a jerk. He's not traditionally handsome from Under the Whispering Door. He's skinny. He's
Wallace.
described as looking like the Scarecrow from Wizard of Oz. And yet he gets to be the hero of his story too, and gets to go through undergo a transformation to become a better person. I love the idea of imperfect people being able to find themselves and their family.
Karina says, I cannot wait for Tales of Verania.
Nothing will prepare you for those books. Even what I've said, you are still going to. I guarantee there's going to be moments where your jaw drops and you're like, I can't believe that was written on a page and that I just read it.
I'm excited for that. I want something like that.
Yeah, you will get that, and it's one of those things where with these more mainstream books like The Extraordinaries and The House on the Cerulean Sea, I'm not censoring myself. That's just a different side of my writing capabilities. With Tales of Verania, I just let my freak flag fly and I just go all out. It's totally fine. Yes, they are very adult. Please keep in mind, these are not books that you can read with your children. They are very adult and have very adult-oriented situations like taxes and boning.
See, Green Creek series and Tales of Verania are high in my TBR. Under the Whispering Door is definitely my favorite. My favorite characters from your books are Nick and Ox.
I do love Ox.
That's what you gathered. Taxes and boning. Under the Whispering Door had me ugly sobbing by the end. I randomly messaged Clint saying I'm dead and crying while I was reading it.
She did. And I was like, oh, you're on my heart. Hugs. I know where you're at in it. Hugs.
I've started the Green Creek series, I bawled, and I have read The Extraordinaries. Every character you've written, I've enjoyed so much.
Oh, thank you.
People still don't understand why I go to therapy once a week.
I do too. I go to therapy weekly, and there's a time last year where I was going a couple of times a week just because I needed extra help. There is absolutely nothing wrong with going to therapy, and if other people can't understand why you go to therapy, that's on them, not you. So seriously, people who are not people who for some reason frown upon therapy or side eye it, I just don't understand. I absolutely don't understand. You have people there whose job it is to help you tinker out through your brain to make you feel better. Why wouldn't you do that unless, of course, you live in America and there are restrictions when it comes to access to healthcare and financial issues and whatnot.
Yeah.
But aside from that, I'm of the mind everybody needs to be in therapy. My therapist is in therapy. She tells me about how she goes to therapy outside of that, not just because she needs someone to talk to as well, but she needs somebody to help process all of the stuff that she talks about with patients and stuff like that. So when your therapist is in therapy, you know that therapy is for everyone. Absolutely everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Corey says, I'm only a third into the Extraordinaries, and this is my first book by you, TJ Klune, and I'm so enjoying this. This is something I needed back in my teenage years. I love all the rep in this book.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. I do love those characters, and I do love their queerness.
I agree with the statement, Drew.
Drew says, how can I get an arc of Heat Wave? I can't wait till July.
Well, they are up on NetGalley. They're up on NetGalley and Idolize. I know they've gotten quite a few requests, but what I love about my publicity team is how they approve stuff on NetGalley and Idolize is yes, for a lot of people, they will check to see, your stats and everything and how many books you've read and your reach and whatnot. But they will still pump out books to people who have Instagram, like 10 Instagram followers, 20. That's what I love about the team is that they spread the wealth with getting arcs out to people, because I told them flat out, you can't restrict it just to huge people. You can't, because everybody starts somewhere. Every account, every bookstagram, book talk starts with no followers. And you have to be able to, you should share the wealth and help them build up their followers too. Just don't give the books to the big people just because they have the biggest reach.
Yeah, I finished yesterday. I finished Flashfire, and I was like, I need the next book.
I finished this a couple hours ago. And that ending, I'm like, I don't know if I can handle a wait till July because of that cliffhanger and that just mind fuckery and
and what I can tell you about Heatwave is that it is the third and final book, and that it picks up almost right away after the ending of Flashfire. So there's not going to be like some huge significant time jump where everything is different. It actually takes place. The first book takes place the fall of their junior year. This book happened over the Flashfire happened over the winter and spring, and then Heat Wave takes place during that summer between their junior and senior years.
I'm excited.
I do have a question that's not necessarily about any book in particular, but obviously you've written some very adult stuff and you've written some very YA stuff, and there's a lot of stuff that kind of falls in the middle. Do you have a preference for what you like to write? Is there a certain mindset that you go in when you write adult versus YA?
No, I do have to censor myself a little bit more when it comes to YA, because it you're writing for a different kind of audience and you don't want to go over the top with it. That being said, the Extraordinaries and Flashfire and Heatwave have all been very sex positive books because of I think that, okay, so how do I put this? So sex ed in the United States is something that there is no queer aspect of. So when you have queer kids going into school and sitting through sex ed, they're just sitting through the sex ed for heterosexual students. They don't get to see stuff that's strictly geared towards them. So when I am including topics and discussions about sex in this book, and in Heatwave, I won't go into too many spoilers, but there's an actual sex scene. The sex scene is not there to titillate. It is there to educate. It is there to teach your kids reading these books that. Is that my dog or somebody else?
That's my dog. There's a delivery person outside.
Yeah, that's right. But there's discussions in these books about safe sex practices. In Heat Wave, we go into more detail on things like PrEP, which helps with the transmission of HIV and AIDS among queer men who are sexually active. We talk about prepping when it comes to sex and stuff like that, because that kind of stuff is not taught. We don't talk about enemas. We don't talk about stuff like that. That is very important to queer boys who are planning on becoming sexually active. And so, where do they learn? They learn from the internet, and a lot of times that is from porn. And let's be honest, porn is not real life. It's a fantasy. It's like romance. It's not meant to be taken as an instruction manual. So when I include topics of sex in these books, I'm not trying to do anything that is even remotely close to eroticism. I am trying to teach younger readers that sex positivity is okay as long as you take precautions and protect yourself, because that step is a huge step to take for anyone, but especially younger people. And the more you know, the more you have prepared yourself and protected yourself, the better off you will be and your partner will be. And that's why, even though, and it shows, especially in Heat Wave, you guys will see Nick and Seth have very, very specific conversations, and they're very awkward, but there's still conversations that need to be had, because you both need to be on the same page. You both need to have an idea of what you want, and you need to be able to talk that through, so there's no miscommunication the first time anything happens or any other time after that.
And that's an example for any relationship. Like, that's fantastic.
Absolutely. And
you're talking about.
I just want to make sure that queer kids know that there's a lot of stuff that goes into that decision to have sex. It's not just about the physicality of it. It's about the mentality, the emotionality of it, and also the medical sides of things. You have to take care of yourself.
When you were talking about sex ed in schools, where I live, there is no sex ed in school. They actually have, which blows my mind, in like an involuntary Bible studies that they just put you in. You have to actually request not to be put in it. And there's no sex ed. And they just recently they're in the process of trying to have all queer books removed, all books like The Hate You Give.
So what they're doing is they're targeting books by queer authors and by Black authors about the queer experience and the Black experience. That is what is. You're on the wrong side of history when you are trying to ban books by authors like Toni Morrison. When you're trying to take Beloved out of a school, I don't understand the idea behind it. And look, you are doing more harm than good. Obviously, that goes without saying. You are doing more harm than good. But when you are taking books from the hands of students who might need them most, you are not only harming them, but you're showing them that oppression and prejudice and bigotry is okay, and that there's something wrong with being Black, or there's something wrong with being queer. That's what it looks like when you are taking these books away from them. Where I live in Virginia, I live in Northern Virginia, which tends to be much more liberal and progressive than, say, Southern Virginia. But where I live in a county called Spotsylvania. And a few months ago, the Spotsylvania school board, at a school board meeting in front of people and being recorded live and streamed on the internet, 2 of the school board members came on and said that they love the idea of bringing back book burning. And I just,
they did that here.
You are talking about bringing back the idea of book burning because you don't like to talk about things that make you uncomfortable. That's what it boils down to. It's not about religion. It's not about protecting the children, as they say. It is about bigotry, pure and simple. It is about racism. It is about homophobia. It is about trying to silence marginalized voices. And frankly, I obviously I'm not here for any of that, and I will be doing everything in my not so inconsiderable power to make sure that queer kids get to the books that they want to read. When I have to get a letter from a queer kid who thanks me for the cover of the house in this really see that it doesn't show two men standing together, because if his parents found that, they would go after him for that. To be able to read a queer book, even this might be too dangerous for this cover, this specific cover showing these two kids like that. That might be even too dangerous for queer kids to read, because their parents will try to monitor whatever they read. When you have to read a book like The Extraordinary in secret, so your parents don't find out you're reading, there's something wrong. There's something wrong in this country that I mean, and every day we're seeing more and more. We turn on the news, we see more and more anti-trans legislation. We see more and more Republican lawmakers coming into trying to go into schools to, as you said, take books, remove books. And look, I try. What's so funny is sometimes I'll get comments from readers who say, "Look, we don't want you to talk about politics. We just want you to talk about books." Look, I am a queer person in the 21st century. My entire life is a political talking point. And when you have people trying to decide what my rights are, what I can and can't do, then that's a problem. When you have men deciding how women should be able to do what they want with their bodies, that is a problem, because it's so funny to me when I hear these people talking about being anti-abortion, anti-trans, anti-books or whatever. It's usually white men who don't have children of their own, and I just don't, like who like I was watching. There's like a viral video of a woman at a school board meeting talk about how these books with gay people are teaching our children evil and darkness, and she was asked, "Do you have any children?" She said, "No." I just don't understand.
Why have an opinion?
The great thing about this country is we have the freedom of speech, but sometimes people should exercise the freedom to shut the hell up and sit down and not talk, because it's just, I don't understand how we are a functioning society in 2022 when we are in a state of mind that is basically straight out of the 1950s with the Red Scare and all of that, and books like Catcher in the Rye and Front Runner and all of these other books that were tried to be taken from hands. We do the same things over and over again. We never seem to learn from the mistakes of the past. Well, let me rephrase that. Some of us don't, because there's the rest of us who are actively fighting for what the right-wing people considered woke progressivism, but I'm just considering being a good person. It's when you have to try to convince people to give a shit, there's the problem right there. And so I don't know. You often hear the idea that we're all shouting into echo chambers, but at the same time, I would rather be in an echo chamber than be trying to tell people who want to actively take away my rights to be who I am. Screw them. I don't need to waste my breath.
Yeah, I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and there's a huge queer community here, huge. But there was still a book burning. I remember sending that article when I saw it to Clint about what was going on. Somebody did a book burning. One lonely person went to protest. They threw a Bible into the bonfire.
Preach.
But it was only the one person that showed up. But when I was reading that, I was just fuming, because I'm like, for one, any book, why you gotta burn it? That's just wrong.
Well, unless we go back like a decade or two when they were talking about how everybody was so upset about the Harry Potter series and how that was corrupting the minds of children. We can burn those books now. That's fine.
Yes, I'm fine with that.
Yeah. I kid. J.K. Rowling is a terrible
movies that we were told not to read and watch.
Right. You know what? It's, I don't know. I just think this idea of for every step forward we take, there are I'm going to come out and say it again. Republicans who want to drag us two steps back is, I just think it's so funny that you have there's such a division in this country where you have the party of we want to tell people what to do and who to be, and then you have the other party of we want people to be who they want to be. Is either side perfect? Absolutely not. But I think there's a marked difference between people allowing others to be who they want to be and people telling who they should be. I don't know.
So Monique says, LOL, or how can we get another sneak peek about the next adventure in the House of the Cerulean Sea?
Well, if you were to get a time machine and travel a few weeks ahead into the future, I might be able to make a particular announcement that is going to excite many, many people. But alas, it is not this time yet. I cannot talk about anything having to do with the future of the House in the Cerulean Sea, but to say there is a future because there is stuff coming.
That's very exciting.
Make sure you're following him on Instagram and Twitter.
Yes.
Oh,
because
I have
there are actually several announcements that I've been sitting on for a very long time that I can't wait to come out that are all should be coming out this spring and summer that I finally get to talk about. So there are some very big news about certain things happening. So
okay, I have to bring it up. I have to talk about it. Yeah. I know earlier before we started the live, you said that you love the Green Creek love that we have on this channel.
Yeah.
First of all, why? Because I don't think I'm not recovered. But
from Brother Song?
From everything. All of it, the short stories, Love Song Part 2, Love Song Part 1, I'm dead. But how did you write something so innately wonderfully beautiful that I literally don't think I'm ever going to recover?
Same.
Oh, that's a big question.
Sorry.
Look, no, that's totally okay. Those books are, they have big overarching themes. They have big action set pieces. They have all of this. But to me, those books are about character. Those books are very character. I love character-driven books. Obviously, that's the type of books I typically write. But I don't think that those books would have been anywhere near successful if you didn't care about a large cast. Actually, probably one of the largest casts I've ever written, and wanting each of them to feel alive. And wanting each of them to feel like they jumped off the page. And yes, I wanted the big ideas and the big story that was happening through the entire series in the background and the foreground. But I wanted to be about Ox and Joe and Carter and Kelly, Robbie and the entire pack. That's who I wanted it to be about. I wanted to see what it would be like to follow a group of people for not just a story, but decades. Because think about it, when the first book starts, Ox is 11 years old in the very first chapter. By the time the series ends, he's in his 30s, and we've gotten to see him grow up through all 4 books. Even if only the first book is from his perspective, you still get to see him become a leader, a man, a remarkable human being over the course of 4 books. And that's why I love series that follow the same characters, because you get to see their growth. You don't have to do 100% their growth is done like you do in a standalone. Like with Under the Whispering Door, that book is never going to have a sequel. It's not supposed to, because I told the story I wanted to tell. But with Green Creek, I knew that there was a bigger story that I could tell it from multiple points of view, and that I could absolutely destroy the heart of any single reader who was in there while I was doing so. Yes.
Not fair.
I have been called, and I have agreed to call myself an emotional vampire because of the fact that I don't cry when I write stuff like that. I'm usually cackling because I know other people are going to cry when I write.
See, I think the main question that has been through everybody who has talked about any of your books is who hurt you?
Yeah.
Because, ow.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I always sort of put your heart back together mostly.
Yes.
You do.
Mostly, right? Because it's my philosophy, and this is going to be a spoiler that'll ruin any other book I'm going to write. And that's totally fine by me. My philosophy is this: if a queer character has a main part in my book, that character is going to get a happy ending. because for too long, we have not been able to get our happy endings in real life and in media, film, television, music, movies, video games. So I'm going to give us happy endings. In every book that I write, no matter what I write, no matter if the book breaks your heart and causes you to sob and cry and scream and curse my name, just know that even if the road may be rocky and rough, that by the time you get to the end, there will be peace. It may not be 100% happily ever after peace, but it will be peace, because I firmly believe that since no one else is going to give us the happy endings we deserve, that we need to make it ourselves.
Yeah, I distinctly remember I called Clint on the phone. I was reading Heart Song, and I called him and I said, just tell me how it ends, because if I don't know how it ends, I'm not reading it. I don't want it. I just can't do it. So.
That's my favorite book out of the series, just because that book is a complete mind fucker, and I loved knowing that book was coming out, knowing that people were going to read the first few chapters and be like, "What is this? Did he forget his own story? What is this?" And then, in the moment when it hits, when it sinks in, what's really going on? TJ Klune. I love it.
My favorite character of that series is definitely Gavin. Gavin stole my heart. I love Gavin. I just want to hug him.
Carter and
What's
Gavin.
so funny is you can tell what kind of person you are depending upon what your favorite book out of that series is. You have people who are ardent, Joe and Ox, and then you have no, it's about Gordo and Mark. No, it's about Robbie and Kelly. No, it's about Gavin and Carter. And I just love that everybody gets to have their favorite.
So Jon says he hasn't read one of your books, and where should he start?
Well, I have 30? Jesus Christ. My most popular book is The House in the Cerulean Sea, but I'm going to go a little bit different. I think you should start with Under the Whispering Door. I think Under the Whispering Door, it gives you a good idea of the range of my writing, from happiness to the tragic side of things. And that book is a comedy about grief. And so I think that is a very short, concise explanation of what that book is and the feelings and emotions it might bring out. Though I will say there is an author's warning in the front of that book that I put in. That book does touch on the idea of death by suicide. Nothing is ever shown. It's not graphic in any way, shape, or form, because that's not the type of author I am. But I always do want to put a word of caution out there that part of the book exists. And so just to take care of yourself if that might be something that might be triggering.
I think
Jen says she's planning on reading every TJ Klune book.
Yes.
Oh, thanks.
I think it's funny that you said that it was a comedy about death. And that's something that I feel like I've taken away from every single one of your books. No matter how dark it gets, no matter how much you struggle to get through it, you are laughing your ass off in points where you didn't think that you could laugh that hard.
Mm-hmm.
1 second you're crying, next second you're laughing.
Yeah, because if there's too much darkness, the reader's going to feel it. They're going to feel weighted down and sucked down, and it's going to be oppressive. And I like the idea of things being super, super serious and then having a moment of levity out of left field. Like, for example, we were just talking about Heart Song. Toward the end of that book, Carter has a realization when seeing Gavin in a certain form for the first time and blurts it out in the middle of a horrific battle scene. And that's what I love, is that because that's how the human mind works. We sometimes say and do things that are totally inappropriate. It's the idea of laughing at a funeral because that's how your emotions are coming out. And it's, I love people. I love, for all the evil that we can do and for all the terrible things that people are capable of, and however flawed we are, humanity is still just a wonderful, wonderful thing, capable of just wonderful ideas and such awesome actions.
Let's see. The literary lawyer says, I cannot wait for In the Lives of Puppets.
Nah, that's going to be... that is the third book in my unofficial kindness trilogy that started with House in the Cerulean Sea, then Under the Whispering Door. In the Lives of Puppets comes out I think next March is what they've decided on, Tor, the publisher. And it is a queer retelling of Carlo Collodi's Pinocchio. except it is about an inventor named Victor, his two best friends, a sentient Roomba vacuum named Rambo who has anxiety, and a nursing machine. You know those machines that you see in hospitals now with like the big screens and the doctor's faces on it, and the machine is rolling. It's one of those, except she's a sociopath, and her name is Nurse Ratched, which stands for nurse, which stands for nurse registered automaton to care, heal, educate, and drill. So, and
Yes.
she's a sociopath, and the story follows these three characters and their discovery of a mysterious android that they call the hysterically angry puppet, or HAP for short. And it's a love story between Vic, the inventor, and Hap, the android. Vic is a asexual person with autism, and it is an adventure. It is, I stretch the limits of my imagination with this book, and it is an adventure unlike anything I've ever written before. And I'm so excited for people to read it.
If I wasn't convinced before, I'm definitely convinced now that you are a genius.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny that I got the idea for that book one day after I wrote. I wanted to do a retelling of a classic fairy tale, and one day I bought a Roomba vacuum. I put, because I always wanted one, and I was like, oh, and I got one. It's just this weird little machine, and I put googly eyes on it, and I was like. One day it was just rolling through the house doing its happy little beeping, and one day I just had the thought, what if you were alive? What if you could think? What if you had feelings? And that's where this book came from. So now there's an entire book based on the fact that I bought a Roomba vacuum.
I love that.
Clint, you didn't show him your mug.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I was like, which one?
Oh, those are cool. I like those.
Yes. And I'm drinking herbal tea in honor of Under the Whispering Door.
Wonderful.
Tori says there wasn't a character in this book that she didn't like.
Well, thank you.
Jazz.
I listened to this book on the audiobook version on Audible, and several times I busted out laughing, and my coworkers looked at me like, what the freak? Okay.
Yeah, Michael Leslie is a genius. And for everybody that's going to be reading Tales from Verania, he does the audiobooks for those too. He is one of the best narrators in the business. That's frankly, I'll just put it that way. I've worked with him for many years. He's done many of my books. He is hands down one of the best narrators in the world. I just think his talent is beyond amazing, and how he has not gotten into like voiceover animation and being in big, huge Pixar Disney movies is just beyond me at this point, because he's one of the most extraordinarily talented people I've ever met.
Did he also do the audiobooks for Green Creek?
No, that's Kurt Graves, who also did the audio for Under the Whispering Door. I tend to want to keep using the same narrators because I know how they work and they know me. Kurt Graves did the Green Creek series. Wolf Song was his very first audiobook that he'd ever made. He is incredible, yeah. And he's been. I am just so proud that I was able to bring them along with me when I signed up with Tor and Tor Team. That I was able to bring these hardworking guys with me, because they deserve all the attention that they're getting for these books, because they are talented and they are wonderful and they are very good at what they do.
You know, Michael Leslie, he was like so sassy.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved like when he'd have like a little internal monologue and he'd be like this.
Yeah, it's so funny because speaking of him, while we've been talking, an email just popped up from him letting me know that he just finished recording, or that the next Tales from Verania book that comes out next month, called The Damning Stone, he just submitted the final version of the audiobook for that for me to review. So I get to listen to that now.
Let's see. The Chatty Bookworm says, yes, Drew, I already asked for it on NetGalley. My brother is the worst one. He thinks it's all BS that I'm in therapy, and that is why we don't talk about what does your family think?
So my family is made up of my sister, my brother, and our friends who are not related by blood. This is my chosen family. I did not have a good home life in any way, shape, or form. I haven't talked to my mother in 10 years, and my stepfather is a monster who lives, I don't know where. He could be in hell for all I care. So my people are very supportive of me going to therapy because they know how beneficial it is for me. And here's the thing: if people are think that the reason that, or people thinking you being in therapy is BS or whatever, I'm sorry that that's coming from your brother, but frankly, his opinion is BS at this point, because therapy, if it's doing something for you, then it's working. Do not give a damn about what anyone else says. And that's harder than it sounds. I know that. That is absolutely harder than it sounds. But keep doing it, man. Just keep doing it, because we need you get your car, you get an oil change in your car, you go to the doctor for other things other that are medically wrong. You need a tune up for your brain. It's just how it works. You got to do it. I mean, there's absolutely no shame in going to therapy. And if that's something that you do feel, though, you know what you can do? Talk it out with your therapist. Let's just throw it in. Your therapist can help you with stuff like that. And, one last thing I do want to say to Jon about that sucks. I'm sorry you have to be going through that. You are better than that. Please stay in therapy.
Yes.
Megan says, what I love so much about House in the Cerulean Sea is that at the end, Linus loved these kids because of how different they are and not in spite of.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, look, I'm never going to have kids of my own just because I don't want to. That's just my thing. I am my life. I like my life. I have it. I get to do what I love. I'm not meant to be a parent, but here's the thing. I love kids because kids should be allowed to have a space to grow and to be weird. What I love about kids is how weird they are. They don't have a filter. When we grow up, most of us get a filter, but through it comes almost a lens of cynicism, and we lose the wild-eyed imagination of youth. And that's why I think it's so important. What I was trying to say in the House in the Cerulean Sea is that kids should be given space to be whoever they want to be. They should be allowed to say whatever weird thing comes off the top of their head, because the more you celebrate that, the more you empower that, the better off they'll be. They'll learn and they'll grow and they'll figure things out. That's why I just don't understand why, like, going back to the idea of book banning and taking the books from the hands of the kids that need them, you are stifling their imaginations. You are essentially building a 1984 dystopia where, the government sees all and knows all. See something, say something. How long is it going to be before signs like that are placed around? Because see something, say something in the House in the Cerulean Sea, that was inspired by a very real thing that happened in this country. After 9/11, there was extraordinarily anti-Muslim rhetoric that went through this country. And that see something, say something was actually something that was broadcast across this country, basically telling white people, if you see a brown person doing something suspicious, you need to call the police. You need to call the FBI because they might be planning something. When in actuality, 99.9999% of brown people at the time were just as horrified what was going on with this country. We're just trying to live their lives, but we made it a targeted harassment for them. It talks again about living, that these things keep happening. We keep going through the same mistakes over and over again. So it makes one wonder, how long is it going to be before we see something, say something come rearing its ugly head again in this country? Because you already have, in Texas, you already have report lines for people to snitch on women getting abortions. You have reporting lines for people to snitch on parents seeking medical care for their trans kids. And that's what this is. See something, say something. That's what it is. It's government-sponsored propaganda to essentially out people trying to live their lives.
Yeah.
So switching subjects here, Karina wants to know who your favorite superhero is.
Wolverine, because he made me gay when I was a child.
Yes.
when
Agreed.
when I opened X-Men comics to see that short, squat, little hairy muscle man with his claws, I was like, oh my god, what is this? Am I getting the vapors? What is this? And it's
Need my
but it's
fainting couch.
Wolverine will always be my favorite, and
Of course, it's
I
a
still
wolf.
read comics. Yeah, no, a Wolverine is not a wolf. A Wolverine is an angry little animal. But I just remember reading X-Men comics and obviously being enthralled by comics in general, but also being like, is there a Mrs. Wolverine? Because I can be her. It's fine.
I mean, there is that storyline where he did have a relationship with Hercules.
With Colossus.
Colossus, and
there's
one with
Colossus,
Hercules.
yeah. Oh yeah. I've read all of those. Hey, trust me, if there's a gay superhero or queer, bisexual, whoever, I will be there to read it firsthand.
I would also like to point out that he just said his favorite superhero is a Marvel character. And what were you saying, Clint, about Marvel?
Oh yeah, I love the appreciation to the Marvel after credit scenes in
Yes.
the book. Like,
yeah.
I was listening to the audiobook and it was like, and the audiobook is brought to you by blah 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 blah. I'm driving in the car and there was like another scene. I'm like, there's
that's what I got to.
What?
I was able to do that. I wrote those specifically in mind for those to be the after credit stingers for people who stayed through it. It's so funny to find people who didn't know that, people who just closed the book, didn't read the acknowledgments, took out their earbuds and didn't read that, and then to find out later there's more.
I was
and not only is there more, but each ending sets up what's going to happen in the next book.
Yeah, I was literally sitting in traffic and was about to turn it off just to turn on the radio just so I could get through the little part of traffic I was in. When it started, I was like, Aaron Bell.
Yeah. That's what I love. Is some people were so quick to turn it off or close the book and they didn't know that there was just a tad bit more.
The Chatty Bookworm says, I read Flashfire right when it came out, so I really can't wait to see how everything ends. Oh my goodness, that cliffhanger.
Trust me. You have no idea what's coming. I am very, very pleased with how this book turned out and the things that occur. I was very close to almost saying something I shouldn't.
No spoilers.
No.
See, Amelia says, you are an amazing author and talented writing. I love all the books I've read by you, and you are now a top favorite author and auto-buy author for me, and I'm working towards buying all of your books.
Same.
Well, thank you. That was very, very kind of you, Amelia. I appreciate that. Some books are better than others, I think, but I think there's something there for others, for everyone.
So I have a few questions involving your characters you wrote. Do you have a favorite couple that you wrote? Because I know you do have tons of couples.
I think it's probably okay. So I'm going to say favorite character and favorite couple. My favorite character that I've ever written is Gus Tiberius from How to Be a Normal Person. That book and How to Be a Movie Star are just my happy places. I love those books immensely, and Gus is my favorite character and has been since I wrote him. My favorite couple, though, is oh boy, that's hard.
Yeah, because you have a lot of couples.
Probably either Mike and Sean from Murmuration or Mark and Gordo from Ravensong, because I like look, obviously I like my characters, otherwise I would not be writing them, but I love older characters. I love being able to write characters in their 40s, because for some reason romance got it in their head, the genre as a whole, for some reason got it into their heads that romance stops in your 20s. That by your 30, you better be married and popping out kids, or you're dead, or you're going to be a spinster. But that's not romance doesn't stop. Romance doesn't stop. Romance can happen to anyone at any age. And so, but as I'm getting older, I mean, I'm turning 40 this year. As I'm getting older, I'm wanting to see more characters who represent my age to show that life doesn't stop, or life isn't all about your 20s and 30s. We need to see characters who are older and falling in love. And that's why I have a book that I'm working on right now that the characters are in their 60s. And I love the fact that we can have characters who come from all ages and all walks of life being able to find their happy ending. Age shouldn't be age shouldn't be something that it should be a determining factor of who gets happy endings. But so, Mark and Gordo, they were both in their 40s, and they were both very angsty men. And I just love those idiots more than I can say, because both Gordo and Mark made some very stupid decisions, but Gordo was right in his anger. He was right to hate Thomas Bennett for the way that he did, for the time that he did. And he was right to be angry at the Bennett pack because they screwed him. And I just love the fact that he was able to not only work through that anger, but see that while there was this ruinous devastation after the fallout from when he was younger, he was still able to find his family again and find these people that care for him, and not only get that, but to get an apology from Elizabeth Bennet, who I think was she too, for while the big focus of the books were on the sons and Gordo, Elizabeth Bennet too had to pay for the mistakes of her husband, and I think that sometimes gets lost in the discussions of these books. But Mark and Gordo are just my favorite. I just love them.
I mean, 15 pages with love song had me sobbing over Elizabeth.
Same.
But on that note, is there a character that you've written that you identify with the most?
Nick Bell from The Extraordinaries. Absolutely. I try not to, put too much of myself in a book, but I'm essentially Nick at that age. When 16-year-old Nick is basically how I was at that age. Only nowhere near as cool as he is. Trust me on that. And I don't have superpowers.
Tori says, as soon as the characters were introduced, I pretty much knew that those two characters were the supers, but I was wrong on who was who.
I was wrong. I was so funny. Wrong.
What's so funny about that is I got, I remember when that book came out, people were like, well, there's supposed to be a big twist. This is obvious that these people, and I'm like, it's not meant to be about that. It's meant to be about this oblivious dork who doesn't know that these things are happening around him. It's not meant to be a big twist at the end of, revealed. That's not it. It's supposed to show, because I wrote The Extraordinaries, yes, to talk about ADHD and queer kids and all of that we discussed before. But I also wrote that book because I wanted to write the story of the oblivious sidekick. I want to see, because we always get to see the oblivious sidekick who doesn't know what's going on with the big things around him. I want to see what that person should be like to get a story. What's so funny is that Flashfire should have been how these stories normally start, a person coming into burgeoning powers and trying to figure that all out.
Yeah.
But we start before that in The Extraordinaries with somebody who doesn't know anything about anything, and he's just trying to figure it out. So when people are like, well, I could figure out who the superheroes were. Well, duh, because it was obvious. It's just that Nick is so oblivious, he just doesn't know anything about that.
See, the only thing that, when it comes to them being obvious, I knew that they were the superheroes and villains and type of thing. But after reading Renegades, I was like, is the villain really the villain? And is the hero really the hero? And I was like, and I started paying more attention that Owen was a little bit darker when he would talk. And
so you see going back to that scene then in the alleyway where Nick accidentally kisses the side of the superhero's head, you're thinking in your heart, oh my God, that's Seth, that's so cute. But then you realize later, oh crap, that was Owen.
Yeah. See, and that's how, like, when Seth was always quick to anger and was like kind of hot-headed in my head, is like, as I was reading it, I was like, oh, it would be kind of cool if they're reversed.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. Gosh. And then when it was reversed, I was like, what?
Seth's aunt. I love her. When she's trying to distract
Martha.
When she's trying to distract Nick, and she's like, oh yeah, it was a haunted asylum. And
it was like, you're so bad at this woman.
Well, no, is she so bad, or does she know the exact same thing that would distract Nick completely?
Yes.
Because look, are you going to say, if you say to 16-year-old Nick Bell something about a haunted asylum, what is he going to focus on? The haunted asylum part. That's, she knows. She knows exactly how to deal with it.
She's like, have another cookie.
Yeah, exactly.
I loved it. I was just like, yeah.
And we get to see a very different side of her in Heatwave. It's something that I'm very, very excited about. As a matter of fact, you get to see all of the adults in a very different light when Heatwave comes out, and I'm very excited about that because it kind of twists both Extraordinaries and Flashfire on their heads and changes a lot about what we know. So.
Corey says, have you thought of delving into middle grade? I think queer middle grade is incredibly important to have rep in.
Just haven't found a story for it yet. If I kind of go the same thing, I get asked a lot too about me writing a queer girl story, sapphic romance. And I will never say no to something like that. It's just I haven't found the right story to tell in that regard yet. And so while I'm not going to say, never say never, I just not there yet. Maybe one day, but I can't make any promises.
I will state, if you do write a sapphic, you are very strong with a sapphic female character like Jazz.
Well, see,
Jazz is badass.
Like in Under the Whispering Door, I wanted, maybe I could do something with like Desdemona Triplethorn and her sexy seances. Having her be a queer girl and having them, it doesn't have to be a sequel to Under the Whispering Door. It can be its own little thing. And having her and the Squat Man and Thin Man go to investigate hauntings and whatnot, and just to see their ridiculousness, I think that would be wonderful.
Or even Jessie, I loved Jessie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, see. Look, here's the thing. Most of my friends, most of my friends are queer women. Most of my friends are queer women.
Same.
My three best friends are all queer women, and that is because let's be frank. Queer women do not suffer any fools, and so I am ecstatic to be surrounded by very strong, empowered queer women.
Yep.
I want to thank Haley May for your super chat. Thank you so much. She wants to know, what are your thoughts on English and other constructed languages for world building?
Oh, Jesus. That is something that I will not do because I can't, the idea of constructing an entire other language for your book as part of world building it blows my mind. Like what Tolkien created, Elvish through the entire, there's literally an Elvish language, whole thing. I can't imagine A, the time that would take, B, the linguistic skills you would need to be able to construct something like that, and C, just the amount of imagination you would have to have. I mean, obviously he was a master, and he is considered a master to this day because of his imagination and his linguistic prowess, but I can never do that. I kudos to anyone that can, but that is something that is not in my wheelhouse.
Let's see. Karina says, I will gladly protect the Bennett pack with my life.
Karina's favorite character from the entire series is Thomas.
Yeah. Good.
She's like a full-on Thomas stan.
Good. Every time Thomas mentioned, tears. Every time he's mentioned, just tears.
Here's the thing. So in the first book in Wolfsong, Thomas was presented as this almost godlike figure. He was presented as this person that could do no wrong. And what I love about that is that we know now that he did wrong. I love the idea of taking these perfect characters and deconstructing them and making them into something fallible. I think we saw that kind of the same thing with Nick's father in the Extraordinary series. We saw him take the brunt of his actions in Flashfire. We saw him being deconstructed and taken apart and showing his mistakes and bringing up his mistakes and helping him learn from his mistakes, because perfection is a flaw in itself. Perfection does not exist. And I like the idea of being able to have characters be deconstructed so you can see what makes them tick, and also see that they are far from perfect and not able to make mistakes. With Thomas Bennett, you either love him or you loathe him. There is no middle ground on him. And I think that Thomas Bennett, for all that he was, for all his failures, I think all you need to know about him is written in the 3 letters that he wrote to his kids. I think that those 3 letters is particularly the one that I'm proudest of, is the ending of Brother Song. I'm not going to spoil it for those who haven't read it, but those letters, I think, are the true summation of him as a character and what we got to see with him and Elizabeth in the side stories.
Yeah.
Yes.
That letter in Brother Song, I think that's the section of all the books in total that I cried the hardest. That is just perfection.
That's my father-in-law. Hope says, I love the Green Creek series so much. It's in my top 10 book series of all time. Karina says, I've never cried so consistently while reading than through every Green Creek book and novella.
I am going to go back to that world at some point. Not the Green Creek, not that pack, not the Bennett pack, as we know that their story is done. But there will be more about wolves set in a very different time period. You already actually met one of the characters in Brother Song, the ghost, the chick, the one that ended up being related. She has a very huge story to tell. So.
Listen, TJ, if you write it, I'll read it. I don't care.
If you write it, I'll buy it, I'll read it.
Awesome.
So I have a few questions that we normally ask every author that we get on this chat.
Okay.
Is there an item or something that you have to have with you every time you write? Because we've gotten some weird responses from people like, wasn't it
Janella Angeles kept a little bird, like a little
on her desk.
fake
Wherever
bird.
she wrote, there's a bird. She always has that bird with her.
Do you guys know that meme from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the red strings, the conspiracy meme where it shows all the board and everything? That's what my writing desk in front of my wall looks like, because I take post-it notes and note cards so I can keep track of what I'm doing. I'm very visual that way. And in the little corner is sitting on top of it, on top of the cork board, is a little stone wolf that my little brother got for me when he was like 9-10 years old. And it is a thing that he got when he was in Alaska. And he gave that to me as a gift because he knew that I loved wolves. And he gave that to me when I was like 19, 20 years old. And so I still have the stone wolf sitting up there, and that's why the stone wolves are in the book.
I'm literally crying.
Okay, so I have my little stone wolf that my brother gave me.
Is there any like writing snacks or drinks that you need that help you through?
I do not eat while I'm writing. I'm solely focused on that. I do drink a lot of tea every day, all day when I'm writing, but I do not eat when writing just because I have to have my focus on my computer.
And is there any books that you've read recently that you think people need to either A, look out for if they're not out yet, or you think everybody needs to read, or it's like your faves?
So 2 weeks ago, a book came out called Lake Lore by Anna Marie McLemore. And I actually just did another panel with them. They use they, them pronouns. I did another panel with them last week, but I was able to read Lake Lore early, and it is transcendent. It is one of I did a blurb for the book. It is one of the best queer pieces of fiction I've ever had the pleasure of reading, and I think everybody should read it. It's about two trans boys, and one has dyslexia, the other one has ADHD, and has some of the best prose I've ever read. I'm jealous of her writing capabilities. Their writing capabilities. It's absolutely wonderful. I also got to read early a book that's not out yet, and I'm not sure when it's coming out. It's by Terry Benton Walker. It's a first-time author. He's a Black author. The book is called Blood Debts, and I believe it comes out either this fall or early next year. It is stunning. Oh my God. It is just the rage that this book is written with, and it deals with family and so the reason my editor for my books at Tor is also his editor, and she sent me the book. She said, you'll understand why. Basically, think of it as a darker version of The House in the Cerulean Sea, where they deal with the idea of equating magic to gun control. And it is insane. And it deals with it deals with generational trauma and racism and bigotry and all of this stuff. And it is a fantastic book that I think is going to explode when it comes out.
Kaylani disappeared.
I'm like, TJ Klune said to read it. It's now on my to read list.
What are you reading anything right now?
What am I reading right now? The book I'm reading right now. Oh yeah, I am reading. They're self-published, and yet they are probably my favorite books of all time because self-publishing does not always a bad sign of quality. There are wonderful self-published and indie published books, but these books are called Tales from the Gas Station, and they are written by Jack Townsend. The fourth and final book just came out. They are my favorite. They are some of my favorite books. It's one of my favorite series. It's not queer in any way, shape, or form. It's not even sex is not even a topic that really comes up in this book. But basically, the book is about a man named Jack who runs a gas station where many weird things happen in this town. And his, but my favorite character is the character that Jack refers to as his emotional support human. His name is Jerry, and he is just imagine Nick Bell grown up and he still hasn't grown a filter. Imagine Lucy from The House in the Cerulean Sea grown up without a filter.
Oh,
He's one of my favorite characters in all of literature. And I love Jerry to pieces. And um, these books are just some of my favorites, and I think everybody should read them. Again, they are self-published, so you're not going to be able to go to your bookstore, your local indie store, and find them. But they are on Amazon and stuff like that. So
they're on Kindle Unlimited.
they are. They are wonderful, wonderful books, and I love their sense of humor.
Okay, let me get through a couple more of these comments. John says, TJ Klune, thank you very much. Meant a lot to me to hear your thoughts about therapy. So thank you again from the bottom of my heart.
Of course, John. I hope that things get better.
Hope says, not me placing a hold of Flash Fire Under the Whispering Door in the House of the Cerulean Sea from my library right now because I want to read them right this second.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, I got here late. I love your books. Do you get to pick who does the audiobooks? The Extraordinaries narrator had me laughing so much.
For the most part, I didn't get to pick it for The House in the Cerulean Sea because that was my first book with them, and I didn't know if I had the right to do that. It was one of the first time in my life because I was with the big kids now. I was playing in the major leagues, and I didn't want to have them be like, "No, now we're changing our minds since you made a demand on how to do something." But of course, I should have just opened my mouth. But House in the Cerulean Sea, Daniel Henning is those characters. He is perfection in that role, and I will be working with him again. I've added him to my stable of narrators I want to continue with. But after that, and before that, when I was on the indie scene, yes, I was the one that decided. I usually listened to auditions back in the day, and then I would pick which one I liked best. But then once I started working with Michael Leslie, who did The Extraordinaries and many of my other books, and when I started working with Kurt, who did Under the Whispering Door and many of my other books, I just decided those are the two guys who get me best, and I'll just continue working with them. Because A, they can handle it. B, they're very, very extraordinarily talented. And C, I know them, they know me, we know how each other works, and I trust them completely. And that's something that can be very hard to do, is to giving up the trust of your words to a narrator who you don't know.
Mm-hmm. Tracy wants to know what was the process for the superpowers for the Extraordinaries.
I put in the superpowers I wish I had when I was a kid. That was it. That's all it was. It was me writing my own personal power fantasy of all the stuff that I wish I had when I was a kid. I wanted to control fire. I wanted to have shadow powers. And then going on into Flashfire, I wanted to have lightning powers, like Misconduct.
She's my favorite.
Yes, as she should. Everybody should be able to have a favorite drag queen extraordinary.
Yes.
Tori says, they had their issues, but I love the relationship between Nick and his father. Heck, even the relationship between Nick and the captain made me chuckle.
Well, I wanted to basically disabuse and destroy the notion of any kind of toxic masculinity. I wanted to have Nick to have good men in his life to teach him how to be a guy, but not a dick. I wanted to make sure that we respected everyone, with these kinds of books. So that's why he has these really great role models. Well, I should say that's why he has a really great role model in Cap. Nick's dad learns how to become a better role model as the stories progress.
There was this one part with Nick and his dad, and I very much related to it, where he just said, I don't remember the exact line, but that he wished he could be more normal or something. I can't remember what it was exactly, and it really hurt Nick. But at the same time, the dad was like, I really didn't mean that. And
we say things
I
when we get
related
frustrated.
so much because as a parent of an extreme ADHD kid, you can't help but have that thought. Like, it would be easier for not just me, but easier for you to get through life if you were just normal. But at the same time, I also know he has an exceptional brain, and he does things and comes up with things that I couldn't even fathom. And the persistence that he applies to doing what he does, like avoiding doing what he's supposed to do. But I was actually telling my mother-in-law, I was like, he'll spend 3 hours going out of his way to not do something that would take him 15 minutes to do. Because
no, that's just how it is. But I will say that as much as I hate this expression, I hate it so much because of what it implied when it first became within our lexicon. But it does get better. It does get better. You do get the tools to learn, and you never grow out of it. You just grow with it, and it's just this is how it is.
Yeah, but I think I couldn't help but think I think every parent that has to deal with, whether it's an autistic child or an ADHD child or any kind of special needs child, at least once they're going to have that thought because they're frustrated or whatever, that I just wish, but at the same time, you don't want your kid to be any different than they actually are.
Right.
And it's one of those things, like, if it comes out, you're like, suck it back in. Didn't mean that. And I felt that with Nick's dad. Like, he said it, and then he was like, I should not, I'm sorry.
And we never got to see it, but he kicked himself in the ass for that. That he came down on himself hard for that. And it shows later when they do talk about that kind of stuff. But that's just one of those things that we're all human. We all can get frustrated and say things we don't mean. And I mean, I've had people say stuff like that to me before because of the fact of when I get going, I can get going. And it was much worse when I was a kid. So I've heard that before, and I know how much it hurts. But at the same time, I know how frustrated people can get with me, especially when I don't get to the point that I'm trying to make. So I get that.
But also, go ahead.
Trina wants to know what or who inspired your characters for your books.
Life. It's just how it is. You take everything in. Yeah, absolutely.
Back to the drag queen real fast, because I think I may be the minority who noticed this. Are you a fan of Alexis Mateo because the drag queen's boy name is Mateo?
Oh, I don't know who that is. No, I'm sorry.
Okay, never mind. You don't watch Drag Race. Cool, never mind. As someone who watches a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race, it's just something I noticed.
I stopped watching. Maybe I have seen that queen before, but I stopped watching. 3. Oh, then maybe I'll have to see to remember, because my favorite was Bianca Del Rio, and I will forever be a Bianca stan. Yeah.
But it was just like when he said his boy name, I went,
oh yeah, no, that was just a coincidence.
Okay. Yeah. I just had her in the brain because she's coming to Oklahoma in May. We were just discussing it before I got to that part. And I was just like, Alexis Mateo? What?
Drew wants to know if there will be a reversible dust jacket for Heatwave.
Yeah, it's on my Instagram. You can look at it now. But yes, there will be. It's hot. This one is hot pink lettering, which is just amazing.
So cool.
I didn't know there was reversible dust jacket. I have a paperback.
So the hardcovers there. Each of them has a reversible cover.
Oh, fun. Yeah, I didn't know that. I actually just listened to Heatwave on Scribd because I want to, not Heatwave, Flashfire, because the paperback's not out yet and I want to make mine match. I'm waiting for the paperback to get to the second one. That just means I have to wait even longer for the third book.
Exactly. Close enough, though.
I'll just listen.
No, she'll buy a hardback and just replace it and get it now.
Oh my goodness. So thank you so much, TJ, for joining us. This has been fabulous. And I can't tell you when I found out. Okay, let me just give you a little way of how we choose our authors and everything. So I go through and I make this big list of books that are coming out and the authors and all of this stuff. And then I ask Clint and Kaylani and they help me narrow down the list. And then we do this whole voting thing. And the highest voted whatever is the first person we ask. And you were the highest voted person. And we'll always try the first. And then if they can't, then we'll go to the second and so on. And you were the first person, highest voted. And when I found out you said yes, I let them know. And they both lost their minds.
My fiance thought something bad had happened for how bad they were screaming. And I was like, no, reverse that. And he's like, what happened?
They were screaming. Kaylani was screaming at work.
I was at work, yeah. I found out at work, and I was like inside screaming because my boss, I didn't want him to know that I was not paying attention to whatever it is I was supposed to be doing. But it was fantastic.
Thank you. I mean, look, guys, I love doing stuff like this. You guys are the reason I even get to be here. My readers are the reason I am here. And are things a little bit different for me now? Yeah, I get to say that I have New York Times bestsellers and all that kind of stuff. But here's the thing. I will never, ever, ever forget where I came from and how it's been, how I worked my butt off to get here and how readers have supported me for so long. You guys are the reason I get to do what I love the most. So I will make every effort to always be available for stuff like this because you guys rock. I appreciate my readers more than I can say because without them, there would be no me here. And I'm just so grateful that I get to do what I love.
Also, there's one more thing. We wanted to be able to do this before the live show so we could show it to you, but we just weren't able to arrange all of this. But the three of us actually have every intentions of getting a wolf paw, and it says pack.
Oh,
because we're each other's pack.
Oh, that's awesome! I hope you guys will have to send me pictures when you do that. I'd love to see it.
Yes.
I love you, TJ. So nice to meet you virtually.
That's awesome.
Taking the time out of your busy life schedule.
Yes, because right now I'm so busy that when I click off here in a second, I'm just going to go put on my pajamas and lay on my couch with my dog because you know what? I've earned it. After the last few weeks of how busy I've been, I've earned where I can just lay on my couch and watch Our Flag Means Death. Have you guys heard of this show?
No.
Our Flag Means Death is, you know who Taika Waititi is, the director of like the Thor Ragnarok and all that. He is in a new TV show where the entire it's about pirates, and every pirate on this pirate ship is queer, and they get to be happy and live lives. And there are multiple queer male relationships that are happening all over, and you get to see everybody have their own meet cute. And the main relationship is between Taika Waititi's character and Rhys Darby's character. Taika Waititi plays Blackbeard, and Rhys Darby plays a fancy man who's trying to be a pirate, and the whole thing is just they're cute. It's basically the big bad boy meets the nerd, and they fall in love and they pine over each other, and it's just a romantic comedy with pirates that's absolutely gay. It's on HBO Max. I'm just telling everybody to watch it because it's my favorite show. It is just my favorite show. Our Flag Means Death.
That sounds like such a fun series.
It is so happy. It is so wonderful. And yes, there's a cliffhanger ending, like with all romantic, because they're going to have to go into season 2. But imagine, like in late in the season, they introduce a character who acts like the person to make one of the people in the main couple jealous. It's tropes. It's romantic tropes put in a queer pirate thing, and it's wonderful. So everybody go watch it.
I am going to force my fiance and me to watch it. Seeing as we're currently watching through Queer as Folk because he's never seen it, so I'm forcing him to watch Queer as Folk.
This is a little happier.
So, for those that plan on watching our After Hours live show, that will be coming up at 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on my channel. And if you want to come prepared for food, we're eating tacos.
Yes.
We always get hungry during these after hours live shows, and
Yeah.
everybody wants whatever somebody else gets. So we're planning ahead.
Yeah, we're
saying,
doing that
Mhm.
from now on. I think one was like someone made French fries and
French
everybody
fries.
else got French fries, then nachos
That's
and
awesome.
everybody got nachos.
But yeah, thank you again, TJ. This was amazing getting to chat with you.
Thank you for having me. I was delighted to be here. You guys were wonderful. I so appreciate being able to hear. Thanks to everybody who's watching. I hope you all have a good weekend.
All right, guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give us a big thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, click that subscribe button down below. And until next time, remember to always be completely you. Bye.
Bye. In broadcast.